In the second week, we've covered Unit 4 in the Professional Practices course, and in the third week, we're going to start doing Unit 4A. And Unit 4A, the first chapter, is, as you can see here, is about laws governing the gas industry and due diligence. This is the whole chapter number 1. And Unit 4 was also about laws governing the gas industry. So we're going to start with chapter 1 right now, and you're going to see that there is a lot of overlap between 4A chapter 1 and a full Unit 4 that we did last week. So we start with, obviously, laws governing the gas industry and due diligence in chapter 1, and you're going to see that we're going to review the legal documents we talked about in Unit 4, that is the acts and regulations and the codebook. You're also going to see that we are going to talk about organizations involved in the development and administration of the acts and regulations, and we're also finally going to cover with a very important concept which is called due diligence. That concept is partly you might think ethics topic, but also it is a legal topic, so you'll have to understand the legal implication of doing your due diligence, that is. All right, and in chapter 2 we are going to see that there is detailed information on a Technical Standard and Safety Act, not the authority. The act is the legal document, and the authority is people who are trying to enforce those rules. We're going to talk about the overview of the act. We're going to talk about the appointments and authorizations. So who is who are the big players in the under the act, the minister, the director, and the inspector and such. We're going to see the orders, we're going to see the powers, offenses, fines, and then finally duties of employers and contractors. And also in chapter number 3, we're going to cover the chapter itself articulates 3 regulations, but what we're going to cover is regulation number 1 and regulation number 2, namely the fuel industry certificates and then the gaseous fuels regulation. Those are the 2 that we're going to cover, and the third regulation we're just going to pass over very quickly. And then if we start with chapter number 1 now, we need to understand that there is a system in place for the gas technician work and other licenses, and some of those parts and the components of the system are, for example, the public, the environment, and the economy. So you want to do something that is safe for the public and safe environmentally, but also makes sense economically. If you follow any of those recent political conversations, most of them are nonsense, but some of them are very insightful, and you can see how we can go from less environmentally friendly options to more environmentally friendly options while not wrecking the economy that we have. And we can call these stakeholders, for examples. Other concepts that are also in the system is the appliances themselves, the components and the equipment. You need innovation, you need higher efficiency, for example. You need self-diagnostic technology in the equipment, so it is not costing an arm and a leg to find the faults. You need something that is easier to maintain, easier to install, and so forth. Also, you're going to look at the services that are provided by the humans and how these are regulated. For example, the installation, servicing, supplying of gas and whatnot. Obviously, if it is a service or a good that is can offer to the public, there are a few even different ministries, not different rules only, but different ministries. You have the Ministry of Labor, that is responsible for people who are working, or that is responsible for enforcing the laws and rules that are about the people working. And for example, supplying of gas is about transportation of gas. It could be the Ministry of Energy, the Ministry of Transportation. It could be the TSSA itself, under the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services and whatnot. What we need to bear in mind ultimately is that there is many different aspects to the gas technician work, like any other occupation, obviously. But you need to be aware of all those aspects, and not only because you need to be a good employee or a good gas technician, but the more you know about different aspects here, the better you're going to understand how you can have a more profitable private business. And I know many of you, I've asked you in class, many of you are interested in that. So the first things first, let's see here that laws that apply directly to a gas technician in Ontario are represented here in a shape of a pyramid. And when you see a shape of a pyramid, you also think about the hierarchy or the importance of stuff. So on top of the pyramid, you have the Technical Standards and Safety Act. That is law, right? This is, by the way, as we said, it is in chapter 2. This is going to be chapter 3, and this is going to be chapter 4 of the unit 4A. In all of them, you see that they are a part of hierarchy. So the top is TSSA, which is an act, and it supersedes all the other rules. What are the other rules? These are regulations. And let me write it down in a way that the Ontario government writes it down. It's Ontario government, Ontario regulation number, for example, 215. This is a format that you can use to refer to them. And then finally, you have your B149, not 15, B149 2020 edition, which is natural gas and propane installation code. And then you have the B149.2 2020 edition. Make sure that you're using the 2020 edition of the code book, not 2015. And then we're going to see how the different levels of those legislation are meant to have different functions. So for example, the Technical Standards and Safety Act is something that is debated in the Parliament. I mentioned this before. So if you talk about the act, it's any act in any government, it is debated in the Parliament. This is not debated in the Parliament, even though both are say published or adopted or written or developed in the Parliament itself. This is this has nothing to do with the Parliament. The third one, the regulations have nothing to do with the Parliament. These are made up by committees, or maybe a single committee, depending on the code, that contain experts and stakeholders, and they come together and decide what would be the rule for that particular code. Okay, so those are the most important differences between the three. Number one, that acts are debated in the Parliament, regulations are not debated in the Parliament, but both are from the Parliament, coming from the Parliament. And then the codes are created by committees, or a single committee for a single code. Now, the second thing is that as you move down from the top of the pyramid, the language becomes more specific to application. So the Technical Standard and Safety Act talks about general rules. It doesn't say how to implement the rules. And regulations are made for specifically defining the implementation rules. How are you going to implement? For example, a Technical Standard and Safety Act says everyone who works on fuel or with fuel should have appropriate license for it. All right, so how are you going to do that? If you notice here, there is a regulation that says fuel industry certificates regulation. That is defining every certificate under the act, and it is defining what is the scope of work for every certificate, how the training should be done for every certificate, and whatnot. And then if you go further down and you talk about, you know, for example, the code that says fuel regulation 220, or actually to the gaseous fuels regulation. If you look at that, it talks about implementing certain installation rules, but it's not talking as specific details as required by the gas technicians in the field. For that, you have the B149.9.1, which is the natural gas and propane installation code book. That's how it works, and this is why we keep in mind the hierarchy of the rules: acts, regulations, codes, and then there are more under the codes, but these are the most important three parts of them. Now, if you don't mind, go to cooperatively.com, sign in with your student ID, and get into room B149, sorry, GAST 1013A or GAST 1013B, depending on what time is your class on Monday. This is for the people who start at 8 a.m. and this is for people who start at 10 a.m. Those are the room numbers specific to your classes. All right, what legal documents are the least specific but contain the most powerful set of rules? So if we go back and look at that pyramid, we see that there are the acts on top, there are the regulations, let's call them our Ontario regulations, right? And then you have the codes. So which one of those is a legal document that is least specific but contains the most powerful? Obviously, you're going to realize that the most powerful are the acts, which sit on top of the pyramid. They are at the top of the pyramid. All right. Another question: which of the following is created after being debated in the provincial legislation, national parliament? As I mentioned before, acts are debated, regulations are not debated, and codes and standards are not even from, they don't come from the parliament. So the correct answer would be acts are debated in the parliament. All right, question number 3. Which of the following is created by utilizing committees representing users? Okay, so obviously you can stop the video and pause the video and think about this, or even look in the book, unit 4A. So these are not coming from the committees. These are not coming from any committees. These are coming from committees. So the answer to this question would be codes are coming from committees. All right. Again, just a quick review. Debated in the parliament, not debated in the parliament, not coming from the parliament. Also superseding, the highest in power, the next highest in power, the lower in power, and also more specific, least specific language, medium say specific language, but most specific language. So those are the three different ways we compare these rules. Right. Which of the following legal documents associated with gas and propane installations is a set of rules that is debated and passed by elected representative in either a national parliament or a provincial legislation or legislature? Code books are not. They are not coming from the parliament. An act does come from parliament and it is debated. Regulations are not debated in the parliament. So that leaves B to be the correct answer. All right. As I said before, when you see a question, you can pause the video and think about the question or look for the answers in the book. The Technical Standards and Safety Authority is a what? Private and independent organization. Well, to find this out, you need to go to their website and probably look at the About Us, I guess. That is correct. A non-governmental organization. That is also correct. Even though, all right, so we call these, let's call them in their, not slang, but more popular term, they are an arm's length organization. So they are organized and working with the government, but they are not necessarily the government. They are not government employees, if you wish. And it is non-for-profit organization, meaning they don't try to get more market share. It doesn't mean they provide free services. If you know anything about anything in the gas technician industry, you'll know that TSSA does not provide anything for free. So that makes D the correct answer. All right, at this time, we're going to go to our favorite search engine. I will say Google is my favorite, but it's definitely the search engine that I use most. And we're going to learn how to get our TSSA Act content online. The reason being is because you'll need to do this to access the Act, which is because it's the land, because it's the law of the land. It is a public domain content, and it is available to you. You can access it, print it. There is no intellectual property issues about accessing it or printing it or sharing it. It's the law. You can share it. All right. So please go to your web browser on your phone or a tablet or a computer, and go to Google and search for the exact words Technical Standards and Safety Act. You should receive this first choice on the list. Maybe you wouldn't, but if it is not the first, it should be on the first page for sure. Once you click on the link that is available to you, you're going to be taken to HTTPS. I should remove myself from here for a second. HTTPS www.ontario.ca/laws/statute, and then a serial number for it. Obviously, if you go to simply, let's go here, ontario.ca/laws. This is ontario.ca/laws. As you can see, it contains all the laws. And if you end up going there, you can always search or browse actually. You can search with the name, but you can even browse by alphabetical order. In this case, I'm browsing all of Ontario government acts. And I know I am in the acts department because I see the word act at the end of every title here, the acts. And if I go down alphabetically, TS, which is technical Standards and Safety Act. It's right here, right here. I'm going to click on it, and it's also going to take me to that exact page. What is this page? This is your friend, and this is the page that contains everything you need to know about this act. It's a long document. If you print it, you're gonna probably end up with say 25 pages, single-sided 25 pages, and you can see here that we can talk about the purpose of this act and where it is applied, and most importantly, as every legal document should start with the definitions. So for example, what is dwelling? What does a director mean? What does an authorization mean? What are the predecessor acts here? So there are 6 predecessor acts. They used to be 7, but one is removed from the list, basically. And what does a seal mean? Then if I go to the table of contents, I can just show you that, you know, after you cover the purpose or the application and whatnot, you can talk about the details of it. We're not going to talk about every single section and subsection here. We do need to talk about offenses, for example. We need to know, you know, what happens if you break the rules according to this act. And then safety orders as a part, that's a very important part. We can talk about the powers of inspection. So for example, can an inspector use force to enter a house or a building when they are trying to inspect something? There's a special, if you go there, I just clicked on it, and entry and inspection, written requests, obligation to produce, and whatnot, obstruction. So you cannot obstruct an inspector, obviously, and so forth. We're just gonna try and make sure that we understand the important parts of the TSSA rule. That's what we're gonna try and do in this case. All right, so let's continue on this one here. And the organizations involved in the development and administration of the act, technically speaking, the Ontario Ministry of Consumer Services is responsible for the act. They have the power over it, but they have also an inspection authority, as we talked about in the class, and the inspection authority is the Technical Standards and Safety Authority. So you have the people who make the rules, and then you have the people who enforce those rules. Now, we need to also understand that Ontario Ministry of Consumer Services is TSSA's boss. This is what this question is asking. So if we go for a moment to our search engine here, and we type in our Ontario Ministry of Consumer Services, like such, you're going to also see that the first choice is going to be the ministry page itself. Now, please pay close attention to this. This is not necessarily in the book, at least not at this detail. And this is the Ministry of Public and Business Services Delivery, which is also called, let's see what we're here at. While obviously the ministry page is explaining to you what this ministry does, you're going to realize really quickly that at the end of their website, there is the web page, there is the list of legislation that the ministry administers. So they have to make sure that all these acts work. And see how long this list is. It is incredibly long, and TSSA is just one of those many acts. If you're interested, obviously you can go and click on any one of those, and it will take you to the act page itself. So for example, Wine Content and Labeling Act. This is definitely something I'm interested in reading. Highway Traffic Act. So yeah, this is where your speeding tickets go or come from. All right, so as you can see, the ministry itself is the responsibility holder for administering the act, and therefore the answer to this question, who does TSSA report to? Obviously it's the ministry. It's not the Department of National Defense, obviously not. It's not board of labor. It's not the office of the premier. Hopefully that will never be a federal issue. All right, so A is the correct answer. Now number 7, who administers the Technical Standards and Safety Act in Ontario? The Ministry of Consumer Services delegated the administration of this act to the Technical Standards and Safety Authority, or Ministry of Consumer Services, or Ontario government delegated the administration of the act to the Occupational Health and Safety Authority, or the Ministry of Labor. The Ministry of Labor. All right. So no, that's not correct, and this is not correct because we have nothing to do with the Occupational Health and Safety Authority. Now that would have been correct, but you have to understand something, that the Ministry of Consumer Services have actually delegated the administration to TSSA. In this case, A becomes the correct answer, for which you are going to be responsible answering in the TSSA exam. All right, so we've definitely covered our ground and learned how to get here. I need you to please bookmark this page because it's gonna prove to be very, very important. Thank you. And now that we've talked about the act and what is the relation of the act to us, let's just very quickly have a look at the regulations. We are going to, as I said, we're going to talk about the this guy here, this regulation, Fuel Industry Certificates Regulation, which is number 215. We're also going to talk about the Kansas Fuels Regulation. Those are the 2 regulations that I will go in detail with, but not now. This is still chapter 1. I'm trying to explain to you what we're going to do in chapter 2 and 3 and 4. All right, which of the following legal documents associated with gas and propane installations is set of rules that are proclaimed by elected government? Okay, so if it is elected government that is made up those rules, it means it's either acts or regulations. That's it. The others don't come from the government level. They don't come from the parliament. After consultation with the public and affected industry. Oh, this is interesting. Now, it is not debated because it says without debate in the legislature. Right, so what do you think this is? Always, you can always stop the video and look at the answer in the book. The correct answer is the Ontario regulation, because code books are not coming from the parliament. The act is debated in the parliament, so those are not good options, which leaves C as the correct answer. Question number 9. Name the regulation that allows TSSA to accept an amendment codes and standards without a regulatory change. All right. So this is a piece of regulation that I didn't mention before. There is a piece of regulation that allows the government to adopt documents from somewhere else. So in other words, if the Ontario government sees or government extension sees something that is published for somewhere else in another jurisdiction and they like the rules, they can adopt it according to this. And what happens is CSA publishes the rules for all of Canada, and then the Ontario government takes this regulation 223 and says, according to this regulation, I am going to adopt CSA's codebook in Ontario, but after I change a few things in there. So how do we find our regulations? Exactly the same way we found our acts. You just type in whatever regulation name you're looking for. You can always type in regulations under TSSA. That's also something you can type in. But see here, this regulation appears the first because you literally searched for it word for word. Fuel Industry Certificates Regulation. And finally, as a second last point in our chapter 1, let's have a look at the code books. They are the least powerful in the three. They come after acts and regulations. They are most specific to application. Their language is most specific to application, and they don't come from the parliament at all. All right, let's take a minute to look at this. Which of the following legal documents associated with gas and propane installations is a set of rules that are created by consensus by committees with balanced representation from users? Obviously, so many words, and it is not coming from the parliament. It is coming from committees, right? Which one of those? The acts don't come from committees, they come from the parliament. Regulations come from the parliament. So you're left with only one choice, which is the code books. That's the answer to this question. Now, we do have other documents that are considered legal. One of them is the standards, or also known as industry standards. So what happens is the regulations end up adopting or creating the codebook, but sometimes the codebook itself is not specific enough. So the codebook might not talk about, for example, what should the content of natural gas be, or what should the nature of a furnace be in terms of building it, stuff like that. And that's when the industry experts come together and tell the government that we need to adopt something as a rule. Otherwise, it would become a problem in terms of public safety. That's when standards are created and adopted, and they are legal documents. Also, manufacturer's instructions. One thing people miss in this is that they must be certified. So a manufacturer cannot just type in anything they want and attach it to the appliance and send it to the consumer. They cannot do that. Manufacturers must certify their instructions, the manual, installation manual, and user or operator manual, the same way, the very same way they certify their equipment. Obviously, two different standards, that's quite obvious. But you cannot, as a manufacturer, simply write something up and say, this is my installation manual. That's not going to apply. It must be certified first. All right. Where would you find technical instructions to convert a specific model of a residential furnace from natural gas to propane? Well, the codebook section 7 talks about specific types of appliances, not specific models of appliances. Okay, so what's the difference? The difference between a water heater and a furnace is a difference between two types of appliances. But the difference between a furnace, say for example, carrier furnace 38DH and a carrier furnace 38DB, those are two models that are different from each other. And obviously, the codebook is not going to talk about those. Again, codebook doesn't talk about specific models. Codebook doesn't talk about specific models. That leaves us D as the correct answer, and D is your manufacturer's instructions. 12. For the information provided in manufacturer's instructions to become legal requirement, it must what? Must be available with every appliance and be up to date. Yes. Must meet minimum standards and be certified by a certification organization. That's the correct answer, even though that is obviously required, but that is not a requirement to become a legal document. To become a legal document, you must be certified by a certification organization. So that makes B the correct answer. Which of the following legal documents associated with gas and propane installation are most technical? Specifically, most technical, right? So acts are least technical because they are at the top of the pyramid. Regulations are not most specific. We know codes are more specific than both the code book and the code book is more specific than the acts and regulations, but there is one that takes the cake here. Certified manufacturer's instructions. That's the most specific legal document there. What legal document relates to the installation of an appliance? Provincial regulations? I think they do. Installation code? Yes. Manufacturer's installation instructions? Yes. So that makes all of the above the correct answer. We're going to talk about due diligence in the next video.